Are you a farmer or butcher ready to master direct-to-consumer marketing and meat success? Then you're in the right place. I'm Jared Aachen, the founder of ChopLocal. Each episode of this podcast features interviews with farmers and butchers who have built successful direct-to-consumer meat businesses, and they're going to share their secrets for success with you. From actionable tips to inspiring stories, this podcast has ingredients you will need to succeed in the meat business. After the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social. And check out the rest of our educational resources at ChopLocalUniversity.com. Now, let's turn it over to my business partner, Katie, to get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Meat Success Podcast. I'm Katie Altoff, the co-founder of ChopLocal and ChopLocal University. And I'm joined here today with one of our ChopLocal vendors, Deb Gress from Vintage Beef. Welcome, Deb.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you today because a lot of the farmers and butcher shops that we work with, not all of them, but a lot of them really kicked off their direct-to-consumer sales or ramped it up, if you will, during the pandemic. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you have been doing this for a lot longer than that. So give us a brief history of Vintage Beef when you started selling direct to consumer.
I guess we were ahead of a lot of people. We started in spring of 2017, a few years before the pandemic. And we have 3 boys, live on a farm, and we're raising beef at the time. And we just butchered a couple beef a year for our family to eat. And we happened to run out of our beef that was in the freezer. And so I had to purchase beef at the local grocery store, which I had not done in years. And nothing against the beef sold in the grocery store, but at the time, our middle child was about 11, and I had made tacos or something that, with the ground beef, and he had a fit. He's like, "What is wrong with this ground beef? It smells and tastes funny." And I mean, he could totally tell it wasn't farm raised beef. And so my husband and I looked at each other and we were like, if our child can tell that much difference between farm to table, fresh off the farm beef, would other people be interested? And so I did a very scientific survey on Facebook, just threw it out there. Hey, if we started raising farm to table beef, home raised beef, who would be interested? And had a nice response. So that's how we decided to get started.
So did you start mostly with quarters, halves, and wholes at that time, or were you doing the individual cuts like you do now?
We did both. The first year, probably, I think it was spring of 2017 is when we started butchering. And we butcher all year round now because we've worked up to that. But at the time, we started with 10 head that first year. We had 10 head, and we had this nice building on our farm that we could store the beef in. So we bought 4 chest freezers, 10 head, and we got started. It was scary. I had nightmares about not being able to, move the beef, but it actually has worked out just great. So.
Yeah. So when you first started out, did you do farmers markets or was it mostly word of mouth through Facebook?
Both.
Okay.
We did start with a farmer's market. When you're first getting started, I think the hardest thing is getting the word out there. And even 8 years later, we're finding people locally who are like, don't even realize what we do. So you're constantly working to get your name out there. But we did start doing farmers markets first. And then also I'm the Facebook era, right? A little bit older than some.
Same. No, I am totally right there with you. I'm Facebook era also. So
yeah. So consistently through Facebook also. And then word of mouth. Word of mouth is still by far the best advertising.
yeah, I think it's, we do our annual survey every year and we ask people, what is your best marketing strategy or what brings you the most sales? And they always say word of mouth. But I think it's really important to note that that doesn't just come out of nowhere, right? You have to have mouths that are spreading the word for you. And a lot of times, farmers market is just the very natural way to start that out. I know that there's a lot of people that don't want to do live events, don't want to be at the farmers market all the time, and I don't blame them. But you've got people there that are interested in local foods. Like your audience is right there looking for people like you. And so it just makes sense to start out that way and then get them hooked and keep them coming back, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, farmers markets are hard hard work and long hours, but we still have customers that started with us 8 years ago, like loyal customers. So it's just kind of, I feel like a step in the process. We do a few special events here and there. We don't do weekly farmers markets anymore, but we still go out there and, work to get our name out.
Yeah. What, just if you had to guess, because I'm guessing you haven't sat down and calculated this, but what percentage of your sales do you think are from existing customers that have come back and reordered versus brand new customers right now?
That is so, I would have to sit down and figure it out. That is so hard because we have lots of loyal customers that have been with us, for 8 years. But joining Chop Local has really brought a lot of new customers to us also. So, gosh, I probably 80% is probably repeat. Chop Locals maybe given us, a new maybe 20%. But that being said, some of those loyal customers that have been ordering from us forever are now able to go order on our website. So it simplifies things for me. When we started, we offered free local delivery, which we continue to do within 30 miles. And then we had people pick up at our farm. Well, now we just have that element of shipping now too, and it just simplifies everything. I'm not running quite as many deliveries as I used to. So that definitely helps with the time and energy level.
Yeah, definitely. You brought up a couple of things there I want to touch on. One of them is when people are first starting out, I feel like it can be overwhelming for them because it's 100% new customers right away. You don't have those repeat orders coming in. And that's something that I've seen, I feel like in the last couple of years with new direct to consumer meat businesses is that they feel like they should be having a lot better results than they are. I try to remind them, but you are in this phase of, again, just finding those first mouths and then they're going to spread the word and then it's going to grow to kind of where you guys are now, where the bulk of it, you've done the bulk of the work to get those new customers. You still have new customers coming in all the time, but you also have those loyalists that are keeping things going for you. And so I think that that's one of the things that makes it easier as time goes on, that kind of the new vendors or new meat sellers, it's hard for them to wrap their heads around. So
Yes, and it's interesting you said that because it does make it easier. Like our quarters, halves, and wholes, I'm always checking back with people. They love it. If you do quarters, halves, and wholes, they love it. If you check back with them, if you get your beef in August and I check back with them a month or two beforehand, they just love it because they don't have to think about it. That being said, it also, you have these customers, but you also have to continue to keep them happy, continue to serve them. And you're constantly, when you run, at least we are constantly reinventing ourselves. So you start doing something one way and then you find maybe a better way or new ways to do things. So it is, I'm
yeah.
throwing all this stuff out here because,
Yeah, no, but that's the second point that I wanted to make was that, like you said, reinventing and finding new ways to do things. You said you're doing fewer deliveries now and more shipping. And that's something that people new to shipping, especially if they are trying to figure it all out on their own, it seems really expensive to them. It seems really overwhelming. But when you really start to look at the value of your time and what you're spending driving around to deliver to customers, sometimes shipping makes a lot more sense. And it's not, once you get going, it's not as hard as what you thought it was maybe before you started.
shipping was probably one of the biggest overwhelming things to me when we started. And yeah, once you get a system, just like everything else, it definitely gets easier.
Yeah. So now would be a good time for me to plug. We have a little mini shipping course. It's $37.99 right now, and it is so worth it for people if they're listening and they're like, well, I would like to ship, but never done that before. You can find it at Chop Local University. And that's one of the benefits of being part of Chop Local too, is that you get all of these courses and trainings and things like that. So Deb, I can't remember exactly when you joined Chop Local. It must have been, was it 2022 or 20, must have been 2023, spring of 23. Does that
I
sound
thought
right?
I was just asking Aaron before I got on. I thought, has it been 2 years or 3 years? Because time just flies.
I know, right?
Was it 23, 22, or 23? I'm
Yeah.
thinking it was like couple years after the pandemic. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I'm thinking back because I know Sydney was on our team at the time already. Okay,
Yes.
well, and you and Mark was still on our team at the time. And so I'm trying to think back to what year, maybe it was 22 that Sydney started. But like you said, time is just disappearing so quickly.
Flies
And for
by.
the
Yeah.
younger people listening, the older you get, the faster it goes too. So that's,
So true. So true.
yeah. But that was your first time selling online, is that correct? First time with an online store?
We had an online store set up, but to be honest with you, I didn't really direct people there. And we really, once in a while, we would ship a quarter beef somewhere, but we really kind of stay away. We really hadn't expanded into the market other than our local market at that time. So, yeah, pretty fair to say we had an online store set up, but it was not very user friendly. And, it was
Yeah,
not something we utilized.
gotcha. Okay. So let's go back and talk a little bit pre-pandemic, and then what kind of pandemic changes did you see? And then how would you say things are different or the same as they were pre-pandemic now? What has that whole roller coaster been like over the last few years?
Yeah. Well, before the pandemic, we started with 10 head and I was just trying to move the beef out of my freezer, and stop the nightmares.
Yeah.
Honestly, some days you're thinking, what are we doing with this, all this meat in the freezer? And we were able to build the business and gradually we've grown every year. And we were growing from 2017 to 2020. But when the pandemic hit, it got crazy. Like we all remember how crazy it got, like no toilet paper, things off the shelves. And about a month before it got really crazy, for some reason, my husband was like, I don't know. I just have a funny feeling about everything going on. So at the time, we were booking our beef about 2 to 3 months ahead at our local locker for processing. And he booked us out for 2 years, which
Oh,
was,
so you had all your spots.
I mean, just, you know, either really lucky or my husband is a genius. I don't know. But yeah, so he booked us out for 2 years and we just kind of guesstimated at what we were going to have. And then fast forward to when it got really crazy during the pandemic, our business exploded, partially because the shelves had been kind of empty. People were a little leery of everything. And we just had spots. I mean, we had even local farmers who usually had a place for, they would butcher one a year out of their own herd for their family. Nobody could get locker spots. I don't know if you remember, Katie, but I mean,
Yo, I do. I mean, and that's what listeners should know. Deb's here in Iowa with same as me. We're not in the same part of the state, but yeah, I mean, that's what is always interesting to me with our Iowa vendors is that I always say you can't throw a rock without hitting a steer that you could butcher and have a quarter in your freezer, right? In Iowa. And so people think, oh, there's so much local meat or there's so much why would anybody in Iowa buy my meat when they could get it from any farmer nearby them? But we've had our farms have great success here in Iowa. And like you said, if you had all those spots booked, it was impossible to get a spot at the lockers if you didn't have them booked in advance during that time period. So, yeah, you guys did really luck out completely.
we did. I'm thinking back. I mean, we were constantly building. We have a cow calf herd. And so we would take so many every year from our cow calf herd to process for vintage beef. And we were constantly building. But when I think back, the pandemic just boosted our business, because we had beef to sell and it was crazy. And that's when we started offering the free local delivery. And people really appreciated that because people weren't leaving their house and they didn't want
Right?
contact with a lot of people. So we would literally, I mean, some people would have us set it right outside the door. Some people felt better when just one or two of us delivering it. They didn't have to go out to the store. It's crazy times, definitely crazy
It
times.
was. And it's funny to look back on it now because that's right when we started Chop Local. And I think back, my business partner, Jared, he filed the LLC paperwork for Chop Local the day that his third son was born. He was in the hospital working on it. And so between the two of us, we have 6 fairly young kids. Mine are a little bit older than his, but I just think back to, I told him at the time, someday we're going to look back and be like, we started a business in the middle of the most tumultuous times of our lives with not only young kids, but having them stuck at home and having all of this disruption and all of this craziness. But so I know I had farmer friends, and that's my last job was with the Iowa Cattlemen's Association. So I was kind of transitioning working with the cattle producers in Iowa and then transitioning into ChopLocal during that spring, summer, fall of 2020. And I know I had cattle producer friends that were selling quarters of beef. If they could get lockers appointments, they could sell a quarter of beef, no problem, right? And then things started to slow down a little bit. And so for some of them, and I feel like at the time, 2020, 2021, like they very little marketing effort had to go into selling that beef. And then I feel like around 2022, and definitely since then, it's shifted back a little bit back to normal. And if you're not doing the marketing, you're not seeing the same thing that you saw in those years. Would you agree with that?
Definitely, definitely. A couple of thoughts come to mind. So,
Yep.
one of the things we've tried to do every year is gradually grow our business. We didn't go from raising 10 head a year for processing to like 50 the first year.
Hmm.
We gradually increased it and made sure there was the demand. One of the huge things, like when we started in 2017, we were literally, I know there's one other farm family I followed from like central Iowa, I think, who was doing this maybe even before us, but we were literally the only ones in our local area. So there was no competition as far as farm to table beef. And now they're popping up all over. I'm sure you've seen that too, Katie. Just within probably, oh gosh, 20 to 30 miles of this, I can think of two that have come up in the last few years. So it is. I mean, you've got to get out there. You've got to keep marketing your beef. You've got to keep reinventing yourself, try to come up with maybe a new way to market it, a new way to sell it, a new package. I mean, it's constant work. It is.
Hmm. I can think of several in your area also. And
Yeah.
some of them have been involved with Chop Local, some of them are not. Some of them are contacts that I knew from when I worked at the Cattlemen's Association. But that's what coming back to, like, I think it's just so amazing to see. I can think of several in your area that are relatively, or I would consider very successful. And even though you have that competition, there's still mouths to feed. There's still people out there that want to buy local meat. I don't think any of you have completely tapped out the local market yet. There's still demand for it. So
Right.
that's
Right.
fantastic. And one of the ways that you've expanded the last few years is with your on-farm store. So tell us about the on-farm store and a little bit. I know you got a Choose Iowa grant for that. So a little bit how that all came about.
Yes. So that's been such a blessing. I don't quite have it all figured out yet, as I'll explain as we get into this
Hmm.
a little bit. But flashback to last spring, we now butcher approximately 75 head a year through our retail beef business out of our cattle herd. And I was working out of 9 or 10 freezers in this little space that we had had since the beginning. And I looked at my husband and I was like, okay, I can't keep doing this if we're going to continue to do this or even grow the business. Like something's got to give. This is not working very well anymore. And so we applied for a Choose Iowa grant. And our store is actually in an old railroad depot. There's an old railroad depot from a local town, Chedrick, Iowa, that was moved here in the 1980s by a farmer that formerly lived here. He was huge into antiques and he stored his antiques in this building. When we bought the farm, we looked at this building. It's a nice, sturdy, kind of a unique building. And we were like, what can we do with this building? Well, that happened to be where we put our freezers in. And 8 years ago, we literally threw paint on the walls, moved the freezers in, and that was my retail storage area. So we wanted to do something bigger with that. So the biggest improvement was we did it all up. It's all painted and really cute. Kept it looking historic. It still looks like a railroad depot to some extent. And we put in a walk-in freezer. I think it's a 12 by 16 or some, I don't know, huge walk-in freezer, and it has been a godsend. And so
Mhm.
since we have this cute little building now, we have an on-farm store, and it has really helped me limit my deliveries. It's because I have some farm hours. This is all a learning process. I currently been open usually 2 days a week, just for a few hours. And now we have summer ball, which is cutting into the farm store hours. So, and sometimes I'm helping on the farm. So even if I set farm store hours, my husband may not realize and have other plans. So it's kind of complicated. We're working through it, but it has been a neat experience.
Yeah. I heard a tip once that might help you out and might help listeners out too is if you have an on-farm store and you need somebody to cover hours, get one of your current customers that
Oh,
knows your stuff, loves your meat, is super passionate about it, they would be a great person to help cover store hours. And you could even trade them product for it, possibly, instead of paying them. And so that's something you might think about. I know your boys are really busy in sports and stuff. And so it
yeah.
can be hard to keep consistent hours like that. But
That's a
yeah.
great idea. I'm going to have to run with that one.
I wish it was my idea. I didn't think of it, but
Yeah.
yeah, I thought it was a great idea too. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you done any like agritourism type things or events, farm crawls or anything like that? Or maybe have some coming up? Are you doing the Choose Iowa farm crawl that's coming up or?
No, I did not get in on that.
Okay.
I just had my second son graduate high school, so I'm hoping to have a little more time in my life, but who knows? So
Right.
that is something, marketing is definitely something I want to step up. Also, making more value out of our animal, learning new ways to bring value to the animal is another thing we need to focus on. But we just, the time issue. I know we're all
Yeah.
so busy anyway. But no, I have not got into the ag tourism yet, but that is something that's definitely kind of in the back of my head. For the farm store, I'm wanting to bring in more local Iowa products. Currently, we have a neighbor just a few miles down the road who started raising pork and lamb. And so we're carrying that in our farm store right now. We have some local honey. I do a whipped tallow moisturizer and cooking tallow with the beef. And I'm hoping to just add in some new things. I just haven't quite figured out kind of what direction to go with some of that. So
Yeah. Okay. I have two thoughts on that I wanted to share. One of them is, so back in my former life, when before I worked for Iowa Cattlemen's Association, I was mostly a stay-at-home mom with my little boys at the time, but I have always loved vintage and antiques too. And so we have a farm just down the road here that is mostly vegetables and perennials and annuals. So horticulture type of a farmer's market farm. And we had this little route in our area that they called it a junk jaunt. And it was all the vintage and barn sales and things like that. And Red Granite Farm just happened to be along the route of the junk jaunt and had their open sign out. And people stopped there and they were like, well, where's the junk? And she's like, well, I'm not actually on the route. I'm not part of the junk jaunt. You just accidentally drove by me and saw my open sign. And she was like, I think I got to get some junk. I got to get these junkers. They like flowers too. And I was like, I have junk. And so that was one of my when I like I said, I was mostly stay-at-home mom at the time, but we would do pop-up sales during these big weekends and I would bring we sold like old hog panels for people to put their bath towels on. You know what I mean? Like literally farm junk. I know. You're shaking your head like, no, not doing that in my bathroom, but people loved it. And we would go to neighboring farms and we would pull out old windows from their old sheds and, things like that. People loved them. We had a great time and it was so fun. And I guess the thought there is that bringing those antique people in brought her a new crowd of customers that hadn't been aware of her otherwise. And so that is something for you to consider is that maybe you need flowers, maybe you need somebody and she didn't do it. I mean, we did go junking together because it was fun. And I also helped her pot her plants because it was fun. It was kind of a trade-off, but she didn't have to do it all herself by kind of partnering that way. So
I love those ideas. And I've got some different flowers and things like that in the back of my mind, but I should just go out to some of our sheds. I can maybe find some junk right out here.
you can go. That's where we started. We started on our own farms and our parents' farms. And once
Yeah.
people found out what we were doing and that we would pay them for junk that they would otherwise have to clean out of their sheds, they loved it and we had a blast. All right. The other thought that I had, we get this question a lot. And so I always like to hear from people like you. When you are working with other farmers to sell their products, Are you buying the products outright, or is it a consignment type of a thing, or are you buying live animals and having them processed to your specifications? Tell me how that relationship works out for you.
So this is something fairly new, and this is something I struggle with also. I think you and I had a conversation about this probably a year ago. So what I do with the neighbors down the road is their pork and lamb, we just stock it in our freezer, and I pay them a commission as we sell. And that way I'm not stuck with something maybe that's not moving as fast. And they also do a farmer's market. So if they run out of lamb roast, they can come to me and be like, hey, do you have any lamb roast available? So that way we can kind of swap back and forth. And that's worked really well.
Mhm.
One other thing we have done this last year, I have a dear friend who opened a boutique, a clothing boutique in a small
Mm.
community in Ute. Shout out to Christy Schultz at Compass Rose. And so she opened this clothing boutique, and Ute is a very small town. There's not a grocery store there. And so we put in a stand-up freezer with the big,
Mhm.
glass doors, and we sell our beef from there. And
Okay.
yeah, and we do the same thing. She pays us, commission on what sells. And, if she's got a roast sitting there and maybe we're going to the summer season and she's like, nobody's bought a roast for a while, I will take it back. Then there's no skin off her back or no worries because we can move that here. So
Yeah.
that's the way we've done it, and it's worked really well. Now, I do sell whipped tallow moisturizer at some boutiques, and sometimes they pay me outright. Sometimes we do the commission. So it's really, I do it both ways. Depends on the business.
There's so many pros and cons to doing it both ways. And honestly, like the advice that I usually give depends on whether you're the producer of it or whether you are going to be the market, because everybody wants to reduce their risk. And I think that that's part of it is you don't want that shop owner to buy a lot of beef off of you and carry that risk. And then if she's not able to sell it, then she doesn't have another outlet for it. Whereas, like you said, if she's not able to sell it, you have other outlets for that roast or other customers that might want it. So, and the same thing goes with your neighbors down the road, if you were buying the animal outright and you knew your customers well enough to know these are the cuts that sell really well, or my customers really like ground products or the value add, the brats or the sticks or whatever it may be, you could get it processed based on what your customers like. But if they're getting it processed with their cut sheet, that might not align exactly right. And so you have to be really careful about, again, who's carrying the risk and who's making the decisions to make that work the best.
Correct. And our friends down the road, Food and Flowers, Amy and Nick Schumacher. I'm going to shout out everybody today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Everybody, I think I
I,
need to take a road trip to your area of the state. Not
you
this weekend, though. It's going to be
should.
way too hot. I know we're
Yeah.
publishing this in the fall, but we're recording this in June and we're going to be having outrageous temperatures here in Iowa.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Get all your work done before the weekend.
no kidding. Right.
Yes. But yeah, Nick and Amy are fairly new. They just started this within the last year. So I think they appreciate the fact that I'm working with them. It's easy. And I
Yeah.
appreciate them too. But it's working out well. Like I said,
Yeah.
if they're running out of a lamb roast at their market, they can always, check with me. So it's working out well. I think it depends on the business too.
And it depends on, the other side of that is the paperwork and accounting piece of it, right? So for
Yes.
you to keep track and do the commission, that is more paperwork and accounting. And for some people, that's not their strength. That's not what they want to do. It's worth it to them to just buy it outright and not have to
Right.
worry about that.
Right.
Yeah.
And we do sell some steaks, ground beef, burgers, and beef sticks at the local gas station, and they're happy to buy it outright from me. So you just talk to the people you're working with and, make sure everybody's happy, I guess, with the arrangement is what I would say
Yeah.
for advice.
So the gas station, I'm assuming, puts it in their own freezers then or refrigerate it. Like it's not like the clothing boutique. Do you own the freezer at the clothing boutique then?
We do. We
Yeah.
do. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that was just kind of I don't even remember if it was myself or my friend Christy. We've been friends since we were little, and she was, because she's a brand new boutique. So she's wanting to draw people in too. And
Sure.
you have the small town local bar next door. So some of the guys might be having a beer and they get hungry for beef sticks. So then it brings people in. It's just,
Right. Yeah.
So
Anything
no,
you can do to get the foot traffic in the door. That's one thing we've discussed too with people though, is if you're putting a freezer somewhere, who's responsible if the electricity goes out? Who's responsible if something fails? And those are the things that you all have to think about and talk about. And it sounds like you have a great relationship with her. So it's probably, one of those handshake deals where we're going to make it right no matter what happens. But that is tricky to work out when you're first starting out.
it is. And just trying to discuss business with anybody is uncomfortable for me, especially if it's a really good friend. So it is
True.
tricky, but it's all just part of
Mhm.
the business world, I guess.
Yeah, I think one thing that people can take from this, especially beef producers, is that adding on lamb and pork like you've done, like people like to have a one-stop shop for all of their proteins. And so I think that that is a really smart move. Not necessarily that you have to produce it yourself, but if you can partner with people. And same for those farms, for them to be partnered where somebody can get beef too, that makes a big difference.
Definitely. And word of mouth there again, if somebody is looking for beef, they're buying lamb and pork from our our business partners. And hey, do you know where we can find beef? And I get questions all the time about where can I find pork? So it works good for both parties.
Yeah. Where did you come up with the name Vintage Beef? Since we were talking about vintage and antiques and farm junk, it's not the same thing, obviously, but I was just curious.
Right. So to be honest with you, we say we're vintage beef by Gruss Family Farms. And looking back, I think I would have just stuck with Gruss Family Farms. My husband, we haven't talked about it together, so he probably would disagree. But at the time, we were trying to come up with a name, and our tagline is beef the way you remember. So my husband
Hmm.
came up with the vintage beef name. To me, I was like, that sounds like old beef, and but
Yeah.
he and then some people and then we wanted it to be more like beef the way you remember. So like beef from what you're used to growing up on the farm. Because so many people are removed from agriculture these days that they don't have access to the farm fresh beef like they used to. So that's kind of where we got vintage beef. And it is funny, once in a while, I will get a call, usually from like the East Coast, not to, yeah, I'm sure city people that they call and they ask me if we sell old beef. And I had one guy who wanted old beef, and I'm not quite sure what he meant. I'm wondering if he meant
Yeah.
dry aged beef and didn't realize what it was. But I explained our process, and he didn't want my beef. It was too young. And I thought, okay, that's different. So that's maybe a little confusing. But yeah, vintage beef, beef the way you remember is how we.
I like the tagline. And
Yeah.
I talk to people who, especially be a little bit stereotypical here, but men in their 50s, 60s plus, a lot of them will say, this reminds me of what beef was like when I was growing up, or what it was like when my family farmed and we were able to get it straight from my uncle's farm, or whatever it was. So you're exactly right. It has that nostalgic feeling and kind of homey, and yeah, I like it.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, we hear that a lot.
Yeah. So Facebook has been big for you from a marketing standpoint, and you do a lot of videos on Facebook, I feel like. Just a lot of little selfie videos that are like, hey, we're heading to this event," or things like that. Was that hard for you to get started doing when you first started it?
I had a fitness business that I did a lot of work online with before this. So the Facebook thing wasn't anything new to me, but I still probably cringe when I rewatch my videos. So I need to get better at videos and doing more of that. I just joined TikTok. I did a TikTok video and I got a few hits. And then my teenager was like giving me a hard time because my video was no good. And he did a TikTok video with me with a trend or whatever, got a ton
Mm-hmm.
of hits. So I think my boys are going to do my TikTok videos. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get. I did a post this morning. It was a picture of me with a puppy. And
Mm-hmm.
and the thing is sometimes when I'm because I am out working with the cattle some I mean, one day I might be helping in the cattle yard, one day I'm not. It just depends on how many boys are home, to be honest with you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but so many days I'm in the thick and thin of it. Like if we're sorting cattle and I'm responsible for watching this gate, it's really hard to do a video and sort cattle at the same time, without getting
Mm-hmm.
run over or mess up. So I want to do more videos, but it's almost easier when other people are doing the work and I'm not in the thick of it. But today I was guarding this puppy. We have a puppy that our dog had puppies. We got most of them given away. We've got one left. And this puppy just ran. We were sorting cattle, and the puppy thinks he can help in the middle of everything. So Anyway,
Not exactly ready for that
yeah.
yet, huh?
So I'm
Mhm.
making a long story short, but yeah, I do videos. I like to mix it up some with some videos, and I need to do more of them. So
Yeah. I think it's great when you can I feel like I preach this a lot, but when you can show your face the way that you do and show your family. And you also include things about your boys, just like general life about graduation or about their sports events and things like that, just to help people get to know you guys as well.
yeah, yeah, I think that's important. I mean, majority of the time we're on the farm working, but we do try to have a little bit of a social life here and there. And maybe just to share with people, that we are a small family farm, just trying to work hard and raise quality beef. And yeah, I definitely think to show the human side of you is important.
So what's next? Do you have any big plans, or as you said you've tried to grow gradually over the years, is that just kind of getting your feet under you on the farm store or anything else exciting?
I think probably the biggest thing I want to focus on right now is the farm store. You know how it is with a small business, you start thinking about Christmas ideas already in
Oh
September,
yeah.
October, because it takes that long to just figure out and get things organized. So I definitely want to get a little bit more busy with the farm store. I'm thinking about, I know it's mid-June already, but I'd love to host some summer events, maybe in July, August. And so I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. I shouldn't say I think we're slowing down a little bit the next week or two because something always comes up, but I would like to get some events scheduled for this summer. We've got a market at the farm, we do an event. We've got a small local fair coming up that we'll do a little vendor fair
Mhm.
there for a few hours, just some different things like that. Just trying to come up with new ideas. Another thing I need to work on for all you business owners out there is my email marketing.
I
We
was just gonna ask you about that. I was gonna say, now when you're at
yeah,
these vendor fairs, are you at these events, are you gathering email addresses and that type of thing?
I started doing that first off, like faithfully, and have been slacking over the years. However, I haven't been doing nearly as many events as I did farmers market. So that is definitely something I need to do, and I need to get on a better schedule with my email marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, especially coming up, like you mentioned, for the holidays. Like, I just think having an email list in the off season, if we're thinking back to the people who are at farmers markets right now too, like how are you going to stay in touch with those people in the off season? Social media works, but it's changed over the years. And you and I both know from doing this for years, like you have to keep up with the trends. You have to try the TikTok and that type of thing. And it's not for everybody, honestly, right? But email can be another way that you can keep in touch with them that doesn't require you to try to take videos while you're holding a dog and a gate, you know? So,
And exactly. And it is amazing. Like people can be buying from you for like a year and then they get busy and they just like forget about you. So you have to constantly be reminding people what you do and what you can offer, even if they've been customers in the past.
yeah, totally agree with you on that. Especially when I think about like my life as the grocery buyer and mom of three. Like, and seasonally, our summer schedule is a lot different from our school year schedule. And like my whole grocery shopping schedule is out of whack. I'm all out of my routine. And that happens for everybody else too. So, like you said, you got to keep it in front of them and give them different ways to connect and make it easy for them so they can pop out to the farm store or whatever it may be that can help them make it easier to purchase directly from you.
Definitely.
So, do you have any advice, anything that we haven't covered that you feel like would be really helpful for people who, maybe they're just starting out, or maybe they've been doing it for a while, but they feel like they're just kind of stuck in their business or in a rut?
First of all, like if they are starting out, we chose to start small and just gradually build every year, which has worked really well for us because, you always have growing pains, but it just makes it more smooth and maybe it financially is a little more smart. Another thing I tell people is everything is figure outable. I don't even know if that's a word, but that's something I like to say. Do a little research, talk to people, talk to other people in the business, talk to Katie at ChopLocal. Everything is everything is figure outable. It just takes a little time and energy. And another thing I would say is, check out what other farmers are doing. Like you could get lots of great ideas. I listen to the Chop Local podcast, which has been helpful. And there's some things on there that I'm like, oh yeah, I do that too, or some new ideas. So we can all learn from each other.
Yeah, I think that's great. I got to point people back to the episode that I did with Sydney because we talked about that idea that everything is figure outable. And the other idea is, I don't think we used that word, but related to that is that you can try something and you can change it if it doesn't work. Nothing is set in stone. You can keep evolving, like you said. And we also talked about how much we love getting to know all of you guys and getting those tidbits of what's worked for you that then we can share with somebody else too, and being part of that kind of community and learning from each other. So that's kind of a perfect ending here. I mean, thank you for being on the podcast and hopefully sharing some tidbits that other people can use. So
thank you, Katie.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Meat Success. We hope this episode gave you fresh insights and inspiration to beef up your meat marketing. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social, and share with your fellow farmers and butchers. Have questions or ideas for future podcasts? Reach out to ChopLocalUniversity.com. Until next time, remember, there's more than one recipe for meat success.